meeting is now recording.
Yeah, so hi everyone. This is, I guess, our second project browser meeting of the week and also overall. It's May 27th, 2011. And I'm looking, yeah, and I think Michaela was about to.
Yes, hi all. Welcome to the
Today.
Project Browser Initiative. We've only had the kickoff meeting so far, so it's very early in the project and you can jump in and leave your mark. So as mentioned, we have a Google document with some suggestions and links to resources. Check that out. Add your own suggestions as anytime that you think of something useful. If you need more guidance, ask in the Slack channel. And we have scheduled weekly meetings on Thursdays at this time. So if you want to keep track of progress or help out. The main problem of this initiative is trying to solve what happens after someone installs Drupal core. It's safe to assume that they will need some additional modules to build their site features. Most of us are familiar with the Drupal community and use the project browser on Drupal.org successfully. But as has been demonstrated by Angie, and there's a link in the Google Sheet documenting her installation journey, if you approach this as someone who isn't already familiar with Drupal, you can get into trouble really fast and you keep failing for a while before you can successfully install a contributed module. So this approach that Angie took is a manual install, so manually downloading the module file from Drupal.org without any special tools. And this approach is a valid one, and I'll try to show that later, but it isn't the only one. A lot of Drupalists, or maybe you want to call them site builders who are happy with Drupal 7, are not there yet with Drupal 8. And they didn't manually download files in Drupal 7. They used Drush and Git. And we have been warned that when it comes to Drupal 8, managing your project without Composer, this is going to be very difficult down the line. You will regret it. So that's what some developers, I am assuming, have warned us. And but we've also heard that Composer can be a huge pain and a future problem for many Drupalists. And there are initiatives going on now that address those issues in Drupal core. And you can find those links in the Google Sheet as well. Installing modules as a general process has many parts to it. There is discoverability, compatibility, installation itself, configuration, updates, maintenance, even patches if you're unlucky. All these components differ based on your main strategy and tools that you use to manage a Drupal project. And we need to identify different types of Drupalists, so to speak, or different sets of tools used, different situations where those tools are used, in order to decide which features of the project browser would satisfy each of them. It's likely that after we discover all the audiences, the features we think the project browser needs will overlap, but some of them will differ and sometimes they will be opposite when it comes to different situations. For example, if a project browser is implemented as a part of each Drupal site, it needs to satisfy the broadest audience. So it means that it needs to avoid relying on the user to know ways of Drupal. While with the project browser on Drupal.org, we might even need better Drupal related information specifically to make it easier for people to contribute. So that's just one example. There are probably many, and we hope to discover them during this initiative. After I've talked to different Drupalists in this short while, I've come up with a rough list of potential audiences based on the tools and how they're using those tools. So this might not be a good way to categorize them. I don't know, this is my suggestion. You can join in later and comment on it. The first type of a Drupalist or an installation is the manual install. So maybe I've seen some people mention this or name this as a configurator Drupalist. They can be small site owners, hobbyists. Their verticals and technical understanding varies, but they all have in common that they use FTP, they download module archives from the project pages, they usually use shared hosting, add-on domains on shared hosting. They don't have any staging or local site versions. They do tinker around. They aren't afraid to Google for answers, but they can stumble upon problems when they get stuck installing a module that has third-party dependencies. There's a version mismatch. The module is abandoned, not secure, of low quality, no documentation, and stuff like that. They can also get what I would call module happy, where they install so many of them and they play around, but it can be to their detriment because they are unaware that they are assuming that all of the modules on Drupal.org of the same quality, and more importantly, that they all play well together.
Michaela, just a second. Sorry to
Yes.
interrupt you. I just wanted to check if you are presenting something because your screen is not visible. If you are interested to see what are you listing.
Sorry, I didn't understand that. Can you repeat?
Do you have anything to present as in any slides or any
Oh
list?
no, I'm so sorry. I didn't have time
Oh,
to
okay.
actually, I was hoping to do some kind of a statistical analysis of answers. This is what I did in other projects where you analyze the text, pull out keywords, and then you get like a nice picture uh, about what the community is about, what they mention in their answers, in their surveys. But we can leave that for a future meeting to have nice slides. So far, this is just to open up the discussion. Is that
If you
okay?
have a
Share
if you
your
have a list that you could share, like if we could see the list as you're talking about it, I know it might not, it may be that you don't have it formatted in a way that that would work, but if you could, some people would like to be able to see it as we listen at the same time.
Okay, no, I don't have a nicely
Okay.
formatted, not even a slide. It's all a mind map in Inkscape. I don't
Oh,
want
neat.
to expose you to that. But
Cool.
it's not a lot. There's 1, 2, 3, 3.5 categories. So that will not be so difficult to track. So I don't need a slide for 3.5
Okay.
categories, right?
That's actually good to know, like knowing the number in my
Yeah,
head
the
helps
number.
my
Yeah, yeah.
brain.
Yes, yes.
Great.
I'm so
Cool.
sorry. It was just not enough time for me to
Yeah,
do
I
the
know you just
slides
did it. You
because
just did
it
this.
led
That's
me
great.
into my research led me into a different direction. And there
Mm.
are so many other initiatives, and I started reading all about them. And there was also videos from the conference I watched. So I absorbed a lot of information in the past couple of days.
awesome.
Okay, so can I continue?
Yes, thank you. I
Was
know it's all
everything?
just all coming together. I know it's not always beautifully presented.
You said 3 categories. Could you tell me what the discussion points of users?
The
Okay.
first one that I
Those
already,
people chimed in.
yeah, the first one that I already started talking about is the configurator Drupalist that that does manual installs. The second one is, and it was so difficult to name them. So the second one I'm just calling Drupalists who don't mind not being on the cutting edge with Drupal 8. Then there are people who are not on the cutting edge of Drupal 8 but want to be, and then there are people who are on the cutting edge of Drupal. So that would be, in short, I don't know how I would describe this. Maybe the second category would be techie savvy in Drupal 7, but not in Drupal 8. And then the third one would be techie savvy with Drupal 8 with Composer. I think the Composer is probably the thing that we'll be talking about the most. There is also the option that the half option of hope that Drupal 8 could maybe be managed the same way that Drupal 7 was managed with Drush without Composer. I have no idea technically if that is all possible. So we'll see. These categories make sense, at least so far. I'll share some more details about these because they all emerge from talking to a lot of different people, and I was just trying to see the pattern of what is common between them. Some pattern of categories emerging. That could be relevant to the project browser initiative because when you look through the lens of what a project browser would need, what features we would need to implement, these types of audiences might come up with different needs. And it's very difficult to disassociate the project browser needs with the general way that we manage Drupal, whether you choose to use Composer or not, what to do with manual stuff, if you're going manual stuff, and stuff like that. I hope that was clear so far. Do these categories make sense to you? Should I share some other stuff about them that I've learned?
I think that would be beneficial. I think we're talking a lot about installation methods,
Yes.
which and it's exactly like you said, it's very difficult to dissociate the needs of shopping for and looking for and browsing modules away from the installation needs. But I wonder if we can't try. Like, if we're only thinking about the shopping part of the process, how might these people differ or not differ in regards to trying to identify, like, I have a need that I want to put an image gallery on my site. How do I do that? Something like that.
I think if the solution they find is hard to install, it's like in their method of installation, that would be important for them. But other than that, I don't know how it would be different. I think one of the initial proposals from Engie was for the project browser to not even care about how it's installed, to just be the shopping part, and then it like outputs you the composer command, or if it needs to be drush, then it's the drush command. Just tells you to do this in the other tool, and so you get your list of things that you need to acquire, but the shopping part would be served by the MVP.
Yes,
Installing is actually one of the big barriers for site builders, though, because there's like different, not always having direct access to the host or those kinds of things. That is part of the big barrier. Just FYI.
Okay, yeah. So
Yeah.
everything that you said about the having the composer, even the composer command ready, this is something that I've listed for the third category. For the first category, the manual install, what they would probably benefit from on a project browser is to have it, of course, inside their Drupal site, not on Drupal.org. They would probably want a curated list according to features. And this is something also to think about. Are we really going there? Because some people in the past have thought that this is really opening stuff up for module wars. On Drupal Answers, you can't even recommend modules. It's kind of forbidden for other reasons, but also not to start module wars. And so this is a problem of how do we grade modules? Who would be doing that? What kind of system we even use. But having said that, oh, of course, also, they want, so the manual configurators want the modules not only to be automatically installed, semi-automatically, if you will, they also want to have the smart configuration preset for them. And so that the project browser would definitely install, enable, and configure it in one click, and even in the future update it automatically. So I'm not sure which parts of these are technically possible or likely to be implemented. But if we can implement something like that, maybe it would mean that we have solved a lot of problems for a lot of people, not just people who, I don't know, do manual installs of Drupal. What could additionally happen with people who do use some other tools like Git and Drush? They could be using some other hosting solutions such as Pantheon. They could still be site owners or even freelancers building sites for other people. And they could definitely benefit from everything that the manual configurators would benefit from. But people who are, so when we have freelancers and employees of small Drupal agencies, we also want to get them on board with contributing. And the project browser ecosystem is a great point where they all gather. And this is a good entry point to call them to action, to ask them to contribute. So the project browser in their case would also have to have some, let's call them Drupal information related to Drupal modules. So how many maintainers this module has, some information that they could gauge how secure or stable it is, how many outstanding issues and stuff like that. And the third category was, of course, that maybe we would get the composer command to easily copy and use it in your local environment to install and manage modules. And maybe this would go beyond just installing. Maybe this would also get you help when you get stuck with Composer. So that is basically what I have. I don't want to bother you with other details. Maybe we can now open the discussion and hear what you all have to say about this. Does this direction make sense to you?
Yeah, I like that. I'm seeing some things in the chat. I'm wondering if maybe Alex or Kevin, Ruby, can we maybe revisit what's in the chat verbally?
Of course. Do you want me to read it, or because to keep it on the video, I guess it's best someone reads it, right? Can you read it?
Yes, someone should. Okay. Would people who put the things in the chat maybe just chime in with what some of their concerns were?
Yes,
So
Sure, I can.
recently, Alex Haley had put something. Slack chat. A couple of points by Alex Haley.
I can't hear very well whoever
Yeah.
is talking. But I think
I can
Kevin
go
was going
first.
to. Yeah.
Yeah. So because I have to jump at 11,
Yeah.
but I was commenting on when she was talking about which modules to present to people in a way that doesn't favor other modules over other modules. I was just commenting that one of the most common things that I think everyone does, and including myself, the very first things that I do when I create a project, I go grab Path Auto and Meta Tag and some very common like top 20 or top 50 modules that it's pretty much burned into my brain, but most people that are new to Drupal probably don't know they exist. And the functionality that Path Auto and meta tag provide, I think, is a good like overall common use case that most people are looking for in a CMS or functionality out of their CMS when they first install it. So those sorts of modules, I think that most people would agree that are, they're not in the core, but they're almost like you need them for most Drupal sites to present to people as a value add when you first install.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think that lends itself well to the fact that popularity should definitely be some kind of factor in the algorithm of what gets presented.
Yeah, although popularity is really a measure of other things, like how well maintained it is, how, all those kinds of things. Like if I'm browsing personally for modules, some of the things I want to know are does it have a million dependencies? Is this going to be hard to implement or easy? Some of those kinds of things, which may not, just because everyone else uses it doesn't mean it's the right, it might not be the right one for me. Although, I mean, ranking has some use. I'd like there to be more ways to filter it, though.
Yeah, right. The heuristics to determine that are going to be interesting. Certainly, you don't want to, download a module that in itself has like 20 dependencies listed in its module files. It's going to be difficult to have a way to automated install without potentially crashing your site in that regard.
There also should be a rating of like, how fresh is this? Like, has there been anything contributed to it in 2 years? That kind of thing.
Yep. That's the hard thing to determine, because there are some modules out there that, once they're posted, some of them don't need to be updated. They just, the purpose for what they exist for, it just does it. And if it's not been updated in a couple of years, it might just be the complete functionality of it. So those things are like really hard to determine. I know what you're getting at there.
Maybe it's a question of how much open issues there are. I'm thinking about like a module I wanted to use where the library that it linked to was going to a Russian spam site. Like literally nobody was even taking care of the basic page.
Yeah, that's sort of like, I think a return to having, and it's a tough job, but like curating the module list. We used to, Drupal used to require like applying to post a module or theme, and it would go through a review process to vet sort of thing like that. So it was a complete code base and it was functional and there was an intent to maintain it. I think maybe a side initiative is maybe returning to that, where people do have to curate and review that in order to help a project browser initiative to make sure that what we are presenting or what's being searched for is quality results to the end user.
Yeah, that was the top thought last week that Dries raised. That should we list all projects or only curated projects?
It would be great if there's a way, like in the project browser, for there to be like a grade or a ranking of something that would reward projects that are actively maintained, like some way to sort of show that, because it's really of interest, and there isn't like an easy way to tell. You're right, like it might not be, commits might not be a good measure of that.
If we decide that we're doing this for the global audience, then it definitely needs to be curated. And we need to be very careful with this grading system that we come up with. Maybe this is something that should be done as part of this initiative. How do we convey this message about the module, the quality of it?
Exactly. And another point for curation and not including every single module, I think, is to avoid the potential for bad actors to get listed in there, and doing a good job for security in that regard.
For sure. I'm curious, Mahela, what you said, if we're doing this for the global audience, then it definitely needs to be curated. I'm just curious if you could speak about why in that instance it would definitely need to be curated versus not. I think a lot of people on this call are leaning towards curation and displaying a smaller list, but I'd like to make sure that we have agreement that that's a direction we want to head. Because if so, there's certainly a lot of work to do to figure out like Kevin said, the
Yes,
heuristics
that
of
is
that.
a great question. When you go through the modules list that exists now on Drupal.org, would there be some modules where you could grade them as, I wouldn't show this to everyone? So maybe modules that have a poor project description or who aren't green, they're yellow. So this all of course affects the user interface that we built for the project browser. How do we indicate to people that this is safe to use, and should we show them yellow ones at all? And I think that when it comes to global audience, you need to make it so simple and safe for them.
Yeah, that's important. But I think it would be great to have access to everything if you want it. So to have, like filters that you can toggle on or off to be like, show me the crazy stuff people have done. And that kind of thing. And that might be disabled by default so that the beginner has a more reasonable set of options to look through.
Yeah, this may be even more technical question, but do we keep this module, the project browser, on Drupal.org when it's built, or if we ship it to Drupal sites in general? So is there a difference there? And do we separate them to cater different audiences? As you said, maybe we can allow broader filtering on Drupal.org, or maybe even within the project browser itself, and let people do with it what they like. Just set up sensible defaults, not show everything right away unless you search for it specifically.
I think that's a technical direction that we don't know yet. I think that last week the DA folks expressed interest to serve the project browser from Drupal.org and to basically embed it in your site. I don't know if I think it's too early to dive into the potential technical consequences of that idea.
So my understanding for the initiative was first it starts with a contributed module, then it goes to the experimental mod section in the core, and then it goes to the stable one. So I'm guessing that's the route we might end up taking, but yeah, it's early. And to extend what Alex said, I agree with what he said, and +1. So I think users should be presented with, so like different softwares have different streams. Like Composer, you could tune into a stable channel, right? So only stable updates are imported. So that we could explore, but that also brings into question, like there are some maintainers which prefer to go through the release cycles of alpha, beta, then release candidate, and then stable version. And some modules tend to skip this, right? So how do we account for this? So if we want to list a curated content, some modules release candidates might be as good as the stable one. So should we use this to encourage module maintainers to create more, like create releases more often?
I think one thing that's interesting about that is that we have the ability to kind of start shaping some of that. So if we as a project browser say things like only stable will, show up in the op modules filter, it might push people to not languish on their RCs for too long. So we have the ability to kind of maybe influence maintainers in some way there.
Yeah, and basically I see this project in like two steps. One is the browsing or searching of the modules itself in the browser, and the second step is install. That may be a simple composer command to start with. But browsing also would require uh, some feature of search, right? So do we have support for modules indexes? And because if we want to have like filters, any search capability, we want to provide some meaningful results to the user in the browser itself. So how about the infrastructure around search?
Do we have any insight from the programmer side about what is wrong with current project browser on Drupal.org? Why doesn't it give correct hints or something? Are we using it wrong? Are people who get wrong results are using it wrong? Or of course, it's never the user's fault. It's always on us to provide something that they understand how they can use effectively.
I think we only have anecdotal evidence, but there many of the standard tool modules are very vaguely named, like C tools. Like how would somebody come into Drupal would know that they may need C tools for things? That's like, yeah. So that's the thing. So we need to have some kind of, we need to help with discovery a lot.
So does that mean that what we come up with here in this initiative might affect how modules are published or maintained or developed in Drupal in general?
Yeah, that's what we said before, that we come up with some algorithm, quote unquote, that we prioritize projects, and I think that will at the end affect how projects are maintained. Yes, because they want to show up in the project browser top results, right? So people start doing that.
I think we should be even more proactive, like exactly what you're saying, Gabor, except like on purpose, like specifically think about what we want, how we want modules to be maintained or developed, and reward that. Like I said, there's, I like, it was a great example of this time when I'm looking for a very simple module and it links, it says need this library, but the link goes to a Russian spam site, or another module I can think of where the guy who did Google Analytics refused to document it for Drupal 8. And a friend of mine wrote, posted an issue like, could you please add documentation for Drupal 8, or I can add it for you or whatever. And the guy was like, no, this doesn't need documentation. Like, those are the kind of behaviors that I want this to proactively work against. I know it can't be stopped, but that's the beauty of this view of like having these different tiers, like the recommended or whatever we want to call it, right? Like, we should think intentionally about how to reward the good behavior.
Yeah, part of that. I think there's definitely some system of manual plus some sort of algorithm or checklist, which is really something to do. So like, it needs to be popular, it needs to be maintained, it needs to maybe have a security release, things like that. But also the manual checklist of like, it needs to have a documentation page in the handbook. It needs to have, whatever it is. So it sounds, does anyone disagree that we want to have some sort of tier of promoted or featured modules or something, and that we also do want some kind of show me everything, show me the crazy stuff available? And that might be go to Drupal.org if you want to see all the crazy stuff. or it might be a checkbox, show me the crazy stuff right here inside my site. But it sounds like we're definitely talking a lot about curation and that we do want curation. And if that's the question, does that solve the needs of the personas that Mihaela has talked about? You know, does having a curated list serve those people better than throwing everything at them?
I think, Chris,
I
that
think, sorry.
sorry,
Lester.
I think that having a curated list is great. I think that's going to be helpful for people to be able to select the modules. But I also think that's, I forget who said it earlier on the call, having something for people that are new to site building, that are new to Drupal, to have the typical things that you like meta tag or, you know, path auto, I think was mentioned, things like that. So kind of have something on the list or, you know, these are modules to initially look at, or these are modules that most sites have, or something like that, in addition to just having a curated list of these are, you know, the modules that we recommend. Does that make
I mean,
sense?
so this is
I like that.
explicitly about educating a new site builder. How do you get started with this thing out of the box, and where do you go next?
Right. Yep.
Yeah, I think that could definitely be some content that fits, because that's, I think right at the very beginning of the call, someone, maybe Mihaela, said that like we're trying to take people from like, okay, I just installed Drupal, now what do I do?
Yes, I agree. We need the curated list, and I think it's necessary, but not enough. If we are to satisfy the global audience, it needs to be even more polished. Because currently, they all come to Drupal.org and find modules, and they muddle through or through tutorials or whatever. So they do get to it somehow, but if we want to get Drupal to the next level where we can compete with other frameworks that are more usable, we need to do more.
So a way
But so
in which
far, yes, on the list.
Okay.
Can we try to conclude our meeting for today and come up with the points that we want to do in the coming week now?
I think that was Sarabi. You're just very hard to hear. I think you
I'm
might need
so
to get
sorry.
closer to the mic.
Is it better?
Yes, much better.
Okay.
Yes.
So sorry for the before thing. So I was saying we just have 5 minutes left now. So can we try to conclude for today and come up with what we are going to do in the coming week?
I think we should reach. So it looks like the general consensus is around curation. I think we should maybe reach out to a wider audience using a poll or something, and get more opinions. Maybe a Google form or something.
What should we ask? What information do we actually want to know?
So are would people be favor like would people favor curation, or would they want all the modules to display? If they want curation, then what should be the factors? I think just those two from me.
Good questions.
One thing I think we could think of in terms of curation is to think of it in terms of filters, because there may be different ways that different lenses that different users have. They would want to look for different things too. Although I can't imagine this working without some kind of tiers of recommended or not recommended, but what's recommended for one user might not be recommended for a different kind of user. So if there were like different filters for different kinds of things, maybe that's too much work, but it would be really useful.
Yeah, I think we'll probably get like almost 100% yes answer on that, because of course they want us to do their thinking for them. Who wouldn't?
Yeah.
Because we know more than them about this. You tell me what I should do with the Drupal site. You've built it.
Well, or just in general for the principle of software, that's generally easier to use when you have less choices to make, you know, And if the goal is to make it easy for people.
Oh yes, decisions are taxing. We have a limited ability to how many decisions you can do in a day. So
But I love the idea that you could turn that off and just say, no, I want to see the whole fire hose. If you want to, you can, you know.
yeah. Okay, so do we plan to do the outreach and gather more information? What kind of information do we need? What are our questions now?
Yeah, do we want to keep it focused on around just this topic and do sort of, I get the impression we might want to do many surveys throughout the discovery part of this project. And do we want to, you know, keep it small around this idea of curation and solicit feedback there and then do more later? Or do we want to build up something a little bit more substantial? I don't know from like a research perspective what might be better or more or less tiring for folks.
Can we reframe what we think a success would look like for the project browser? What would we be happy with?
I could answer it something that Apple Store have with an or Android Store have with a lot of modules. So I see it as just a perfect solution for users.
You mean just their number? So many?
No, not so many. The simplicity of installation. So if you want to have something, you just opening the Google Play, you're searching for everything that you want, just installing and using, and that's all. Like.
So are you saying that the most important feature for you in the project browser is that it can install the module instead of you, for you?
It could install, could update it, but it is my experience because I worked a lot with WordPress before and with the other like cloud CMS, and you could just search for something that's solving your problem. You don't need to dig inside all the tool called the C tools and other thing. You have a problem, you're searching for a solution, you installing it, configuring, and that's all. And you don't care about all this like Composer, Josh, and other stuff. So I see it as a like a best solution for because Drupal is quite simple. Simple. It's quite complex to maintain and to work with it. But
Yes.
it's just in my opinion.
So in those other frameworks that you have experience with, are there conflicts? Are you ever confused about which module or plugin to install there? Because I know WordPress has a lot of plugins and sometimes you can get them in conflict and they're not all of the highest quality.
Totally, for sure. Like and with the Windows or the Linux, you trying to search some application, you found like 3 or 5 of them, and none of them are solving your problem 100% because like different people did different solutions, and that's the problem that we have right now. So if you like, for most of the popular thing, we have a model for Drupal, but for not so common thing like with the gallery, there is like 10 modules, and none of them is like ideal. Like none of them is like perfect one. So this problem we can't fix, like because this problem is already present. Like and. Yeah, but if like, for example, if I remind myself like 10 years ago when I started to work with Drupal, like it was Drupal 6 and it was like, and like the Drush did some help, but not so much because you still need to find something on the quite old look and feel Drupal org, and you need to find something, the description itself, you're lucky if there will be some screenshot, like usually it's 1 or 2 screenshot of the admin toolbar, and that's all. And you're lucky if there is some good description of it on it. And just for me, there's like 2 different modules. For example, one's like a system modules, for example, NIM, mail, or SMTP module. Like it is purely like a system model that you're doing some system stuff like connecting to the external SMTP. Or there's like some more user-friendly model, like the ones that providing the gallery, or for example, some maybe MailChimp integration or some advertisement integration, the ones that providing some functional for end users, like you could like show for other users. And for my sort of use, it's like for a system model, you can't make it better as it's now. You just think you need to dig just to dig to the like this complex task and understand what you need to solve. But for the front end, for the end user models like a gallery, you just need to see the reviews, to see the description, much more screenshots to be sure before you installing it. Like if it's screenshot as you see, it's like okay for you, just click to install and create new content with the gallery, and that's all that you need. So like if you understand what I mean.
Yes, yes, and we mentioned this last meeting. Someone suggested that we need a lot more screenshots in a lot of the modules that are listed on Drupal.org, and I'm guessing a better project description. Uh, as far as I can tell, we already have a good template for a new module maintainer to follow when describing their module. We are reminding them to add dependencies, to add any, I don't know, special notices about what to be mindful about. But this varies widely from module to module. So the project pages vary in quality. And I know that a lot of programmers don't really care much about writing the project page. They do it always from the bottoms up, from their perspective. And it would be helpful if maybe they could be paired with someone who can write something that is more user friendly from that side of things. And of course, post more screenshots. I totally volunteer to make screenshots. I'm addicted to screenshots.
So can I assume that before implementing the project browser inside the Drupal, we need to like rework and update a lot of meta information for each popular model on the Drupal org, right? Like as
We
it
need
mentioned
to,
here.
we need to define what the MVP is for the project, and then discuss what changes Drupal.org would need. Yes. So we are last time and this time we listed a lot of ideas, and it would be probably a bad idea to implement all of them on Drupal.org. It would be unmaintainable. So we need to define which ones are make the most sense. And that said, I think we are 5 minutes over our meeting time. So in the interest of not taking hostage of our attendees, we should probably try to figure out if is the next step to create the survey? Is somebody taking on that step? Or if we are not interested in the survey, then what are our next steps?
I think a chat thread in the Slack channel for getting the survey questions if you want to do surveys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my suggestion might be to put a pin in that for a week. It probably won't kill us if we have to wait a week. So let's think more about the survey and maybe come to the next week's meeting with any ideas about it, and we can talk about that offline into the
Yep.
Slack channel, and then let's just, yeah, I don't think we need to rush to get it done before next week's meeting. I think that would be, yeah.
I think we all more or less agreed on the curated list, right? So this automatically means that we'll need some kind of a review system of the modules. And I guess it's clear to a lot of people that a lot of the modules will also need to be updated. So someone to rewrite the text on the project page and add more screenshots, more documentation or something like that. Because a lot of it is targeted at Drupal developers. It's filled with Drupalisms. So we understand what this project page means, but someone who just installed Drupal core and wants a recommendation for their site gallery won't understand all of the talk about third-party library dependencies, stuff like that. So I'm not sure what a poll would give us, what we should ask in a
Yeah.
poll. So far, I think we agreed on things. Uh, are there any outstanding issues that we need to discuss that we haven't touched?
Oh, there's probably a million. But in the interest of time, yeah, I don't want to go too far over.
So if this poll will be targeted to the site builders and the client who is new for Drupal, right?
Okay.
I mean, if we could ask the people who is quite new on Drupal or not so like technically strong, I'd like to know their opinion that how they searching and selecting the models and what they like, what they stop it to use some models or what they making their life harder to like to install and configure something on Drupal. Like someone mentioned about the like a guide or something that for newcomers.
Okay. Does that
That's a good
mean
question to think about for
that-
the survey, but we need to wrap up this meeting right now.
Okay. I mean, I'm okay to stay a while and discuss if anyone wants to.
I don't know if that's fair to others, but maybe we could keep the conversation going in Slack.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
we should use
I
Slack.
like that.
Do we discuss the next steps in the Slack itself then?
Yes.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
Thanks so much, everyone,
Right.
especially Mihaela for doing the research and synthesizing the ideas. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ruby,
Yeah.
for your ideas. You helped a lot, and all of you who helped. Thank you so much.
Great work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thanks for
everyone.
joining.
See you in the chat.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, folks.